When he returned, Mama Adia nodded approval and led him through archaic, gory rituals late one night. Bob shuddered as the decrepit shaman sacrificed innocent creatures, their blood and parts combined in a sickening stew over flames as she chanted primordially. The fire crackled ominously as Mama Adia stirred the bubbling concoction. Bob watched, his stomach churning with a mix of disgust and anticipation. The old woman's eyes gleamed in the firelight as she spoke. "The spirits have heard your plea," she rasped. "But remember, young man, there is always a price to pay when you meddle with dark forces." Bob nodded, too focused on his goal to heed her warning. "Just tell me what to do." Mama Adia handed him a small clay pot filled with a foul-smelling liquid. "Pour this on Mary's doorstep at midnight. It will seep into her dreams and slowly poison her mind." With shaking hands, Bob took the pot and left. That night, under the cover of darkness, he crept to Mary's new apartment. His heart raced as he tipped the contents onto her doorstep, watching as the ground seemed to drink it in hungrily. Miles away, Mary woke with a start, her pregnant belly heavy and round. Something felt wrong. A chill ran down her spine and she pulled the blankets tighter around herself. In the corner of the room, the homeless man she'd rescued, who she now knew as Robert, mumbled in his sleep. His words were gibberish as always, but tonight they seemed more frantic, more urgent. As the days passed, strange things began to happen. Mary's dreams turned dark and twisted. She'd wake up screaming, images of grotesque creatures and blood-soaked landscapes fresh in her mind. The pregnancy, once a source of joy, now filled her with dread. Robert's condition worsened too. His eyes, once the now darted around the room as if seeing things Mary couldn't. He'd cower in corners, whimpering about shadows and teeth. One night, as Mary lay awake, she heard a scratching at the door. Thinking it was a stray animal, she cautiously approached. But when she opened it, there was nothing there, just an empty hallway and the faint echo of laughter. The next morning, she found deep scratches on the door, from the inside. Fear-Bevoiced-like's constant companion. She'd catch glimpses of distorted faces in mirrors, hear whispers in empty rooms. The baby inside her kicked with unnatural strength, leaving bruises on her skin. Bob, meanwhile, was consumed by his desire for revenge. He'd visit Mama Adia regularly, demanding updates. Each time, she'd assure him the curse was working, but warn him of the consequences. Bob brushed off her concerns, his heart hardening with each passing day. As Mary's due date approached, the horrors intensified. One evening, she found Robert standing in the kitchen, a knife in his hand, his eyes wild. "They're coming," he whispered. "They want the child." Mary backed away slowly, her hands protectively over her belly. "Who's coming, Robert? Who wants our baby?" But Robert just shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "I remember now. I remember everything. My brother. He did this to me, and now they're coming for us all." Before Mary could respond, the lights flickered and went out. In the darkness, she heard Robert scream, a sound of pure terror that chilled her to her core. When the lights came back on seconds later, Robert was gone. Panicked, Mary called the police. They searched the entire building but found no trace of Robert. It was as if he'd vanished into thin air. That night, as Mary tried to sleep, she felt a presence in the room. Opening her eyes, she saw a figure standing at the foot of her bed. Tall, dark, with glowing red eyes. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure spoke, its voice like gravel. "The child is ours. You cannot escape your destiny." Mary squeezed her eyes shut, praying it was just another nightmare. When she opened them again, the figure was gone, but a symbol was burned into her bedroom wall, a twisted, ancient-looking mark that made her skin crawl. The next day, desperate and terrified, Mary went to see a local priest. Father Emmanuel listened to her story with growing concern. "My child," he said gravely, "I fear dark forces are at work here. This symbol you describe, it's an ancient mark of evil. Someone has placed a powerful curse on you and your unborn child." Mary broke down in tears. "What can I do, Father? I'm so scared." The priest placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We must pray for protection and seek help from those who understand these forces. I know someone who might be able to help." Father Emmanuel took Mary to see Mama Iyabo, a respected spiritual healer. The old woman's eyes widened as Mary entered her hut. "I've been expecting you," Mama Iyabo said. "The spirits have shown me your plight. The child you carry is special, a chosen one. That's why the dark forces seek to claim it." Mary's hand instinctively went to her belly. "Chosen for what?" Mama Iyabo's expression was grave. "To restore balance. Your child is destined to become a great leader, one who will bring light to the darkness that threatens our world. But first, we must break this curse and protect you both." Over the next few days, Mama Iyabo performed cleansing rituals and gave Mary protective charms. The oppressive feeling that had been haunting Mary began to lift, but she knew the danger wasn't over. Meanwhile, Bob was growing impatient. He returned to Mama Adia, demanding to know why Mary wasn't dead yet. The old woman's eyes flashed with anger. "Foolish boy! Did I not warn you of the consequences? The forces you've awakened are beyond your control. They've latched onto your hatred and are using it to fuel their own agenda." As if on cue, the ground began to shake. The walls of Mama Adia's hut cracked and a foul wind swept through. Bob watched in horror as the old woman's body began to twist and contort, her face elongating into something inhuman. "Run, you fool!" she screeched, her voice no longer her own. "Run before they take you too!" Bob didn't need to be told twice. He fled into the night, the sound of unearthly howls echoing behind him. But no matter how far or fast he ran, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was following him, always just out of sight. Days turned into weeks. Mary, under Mama Iyabo's protection, felt stronger. The nightmares had stopped, and she could feel her baby's peaceful movements. But the disappearance of Robert still weighed heavily on her mind. One stormy night, as Mary prepared for bed, there was a frantic knocking at her door. She opened it to find Bob, disheveled and wild-eyed. "Mary," he gasped, "I'm so sorry, I did this. I cursed you, but now they're after me too. Please, you have to help me." Before Mary could respond, a dark mist began to seep under the door. Bob screamed as shadowy tendrils wrapped around his legs, pulling him into the hallway. Mary slammed the door shut, her heart pounding. She could hear Bob's screams fading, as if he was being dragged far away. Then, silence. The next morning there was no trace of Bob or the strange mist, but Mary found a note slipped under her door. In shaky handwriting it read, "The truth lies with the king. Find Dan." Mary's mind raced. Dan. That was the name Robert had mentioned in his fevered ramblings. Could this be the brother he spoke of? With Mama Iyabo's blessing and protection, Mary set out to find answers. Her search led her to a neighboring kingdom, where she discovered that Dan was none other than the crown prince. Using her wits and the spiritual knowledge Mama Iyabo had imparted, Mary managed to secure an audience with Prince Dan. As soon as she entered the palace, she felt a shift in the air, a familiar darkness that made her skin crawl. Prince Dan greeted her with a charming smile, but Mary could see the malevolence in his eyes. "To what do I owe the pleasure of this visit?" he asked smoothly. Mary took a deep breath. "I'm here about your brother, Robert." The prince's smile faltered for just a moment. "I'm afraid you must be mistaken. I have no brother." But Mary stood her ground. She told Dan everything, about finding Robert, the curse, the disappearances. With each word, she could see the prince's composure cracking. Finally, Dan's facade shattered, his face contorted with rage. "You fool!" he snarled. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The powers I've bargained with to secure my throne?" The room grew dark, and Mary could hear whispering voices all around them. Dan's body began to change, growing larger, more monstrous. "I sold my soul for this crown," he growled, his voice no longer human. "And I won't let anyone, not my brother, not you, not that cursed child, take it from me." As Dan lunged at her, Mary instinctively placed her hand on her belly and whispered the protection chant Mama Iyabo had taught her. A blinding light erupted from her, forcing Dan back. The prince howled in agony as the light touched him, his monstrous form melting away. The darkness that had filled the room was pushed back, revealing the shocked faces of courtiers and guards who had been hidden in the shadows. In that moment of confusion, a figure burst into the room. Robert, his eyes clear and focused for the first time since Mary had found him. "It's over, brother," Robert said firmly. "Your dark bargain ends now." As if triggered by Robert's words, the palace began to shake. The shadows that had been forced back now swirled angrily, converging on Dan. The prince screamed as he was engulfed, his body twisting and shrinking until, with a final howl, he vanished completely. In the stunned silence that followed, Robert turned to Mary, tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he said softly. "Your love and your child's pure spirit broke the curse and brought me back. You've saved not just me, but this entire kingdom." The aftermath was a whirlwind. With Dan gone, the truth of Robert's identity as the true heir came to light. The kingdom rejoiced at the return of their long-lost prince, and Robert was crowned king. Mary, her role in breaking the curse known to all, was hailed as a hero. When her child, a healthy baby boy, was born months later, the entire kingdom celebrated. The baby was blessed by Mama Iyabo herself, who proclaimed him the promised one, destined to bring light to the darkest corners of the world. As for Bob, no trace of him was ever found. But sometimes, on dark nights, people would claim to hear distant screams on the wind, a chilling reminder of the price of tampering with forces beyond human understanding. Years passed. Mary and Robert ruled the kingdom with wisdom and compassion, their son growing into a strong, kind-hearted young man. The darkness that had once threatened to consume them all was held at bay, but Mary never forgot the horrors they had faced. She would often stand on the palace balcony, looking out at the peaceful kingdom, her hand absently tracing the faded mark on her arm, a reminder of the curse that had brought her to this unexpected destiny. And in those quiet moments, she would whisper a prayer of thanks for the strength to overcome the darkness, and a plea for continued protection against the shadows that she knew were always waiting, just out of sight, ready to strike again.